Good morning, everyone. As we begin, we're going to have a message from our presenting sponsor, Anuva Health. So there'll be a brief video welcome from our sponsor, and then we'll begin with the program. Thanks again for joining us. If at any time you have questions or comments, please use the Zoom chat. Thanks again.
Well, good morning. My name is David Nill. I'm a family physician, chief medical officer at Cerner Corporation. So I have responsibility for the health and well-being of our global population and our dependent population as well. In addition to that, I am the medical director for Workforce Health Services, which is our commercial business that provides services to employers, both health and care services. So you all may be aware of the Anuva clinics in the Malvern area. So I would like to thank the Chester County Chamber of Business and Industry for inviting us to this conference and asking me to do the kickoff presentation. I know the group is active and really tries to help drive the community health. And if you have a strong community health, you have a strong business health as well. Very quickly, the status of the pandemic, everyone watches the news. The good news is it looks like we may be hitting a plateau, so we may have peaked finally, but yet we're starting to see variants of the virus and such, especially just recent news of the Brazil variant being present in the US now. So many of you are thinking about your return to workplace or reentry strategies. So many employers have put off reentry to buildings until April, but a lot of them are actually pushing off until June, July, even as late as August. So this is a timely discussion about how you're going to reenter the workplace, and also what does your workforce look like? Hybrid workforces now are starting to show a lot of virtual people, some that are shared office versus virtual, and then many of you will have employees or associates that are full-time in the office. The big item right now is our vaccines. News every day. We have a new administration putting forth their new plan on how to do this, anywhere from 100 million to 150 million vaccines in 100 days. So I know that is factoring in on your strategies. How do I get my people immunized? Some of you are looking at trying to do on-site immunizations in your own facilities. We have people asking Cerner, can you help us with this? So we do offer an immunization support service across the nation that we've just started up. And then Cerner and our traditional client base, hospitals and other systems, have facilitated this through the technology layers in order to make these events seamless and very quick to do mass vaccinations. A lot of questions for employers that are coming up. What about requiring vaccines? I've heard it mentioned in many of the meetings that I sit in on, but no one has gotten forward as far as requiring immunizations yet. There aren't enough people being immunized yet that I would see personally as being able to put that requirement in. I can honestly say that Cerner has taken the stance. We are not going to require our associates to be immunized, but we know that that will likely become an issue maybe second half of the year, where hospitals may come forward and say, you have to be immunized for COVID in order to enter into the facilities and such. So we're watching that very closely. So again, the topics that this group is discussing, I think they're great. I think we need to have these dialogues early instead of being faced with it in a crunch at the last minute. So again, I hope you all have a wonderful meeting, some strong brainstorming, a lot of smart people presenting. And again, I would like to thank the Chamber for, again, putting this on and supporting the community.
Good morning again, everyone. My name is Guy Shiraki, and I serve as the CEO of the Chester County Chamber. I begin by thanking Dr. Nill and Anuva Health and Cerner, based in Malvern, as being our event sponsor and bringing this important message and this important event to us. We are pleased to partner today with the Chester County Human Resources Association Today, in concert with CCHRA, we are presenting a panel of experts in legal, medical, and HR expertise with, as Dr. Nill referenced, offering you guidance on how to reopen safely. Whether your business is a B or a B2C, all of us are facing the issue that over the next few months, over the next year, our workplace is going to look a little different. Some workers will start to come back, events will start to happen. You'll begin to engage many of your suppliers or vendors. And also we're aware that every one of us on this call has our own family or personal needs. You may be active in volunteer organizations or you have elderly parents or children. So all of us come to this event today wearing many hats, not only our business hat, but our real world hat. Our hope today and our goal is to make sure that the panelists today can answer your questions or at least point you in the right direction when a question comes up in a week or a month from now. And I want you to know whether that question arises today, you can use our chat box to raise those questions. But if you have a question later today or a week or even a month from now, if you contact us at the Chamber, we'll make sure the panelists or one of our other members or associations can get back to you to help you. Our objective is to help as many businesses open as much as they want to, as quickly as you can and as safely as you can, so that we can be part of the effort to return us back to normal business and personal engagement and get our economy and our community back the way it goes. As we begin our event, we start with two keynote presentations, one from the legal side and one from the medical side. The first of our panelists, or the first of our keynote speakers, is Dave Hackett. Dave is our chair-elect at the Chamber. Dave is an attorney and a partner at Cozen O'Connor, and his field of expertise is in employment law. And like many of us, he's been looking at these issues, but studying them with a legal perspective of how to advise clients, big and small, on how to go about reopening, engaging customers and clients. So first we're going to hear from Dave, and then he's going to pass it along to our medical expert, Dr. Donzi, and then we'll begin with question and answers. Again, if at any time you have a question you'd like us to discuss, please include it in the chat box. We appreciate so many of you being with us. We thank our panelists in advance for their time. And at this point, I'm going to turn the floor over to our first keynote presentation, Dave Hackett of the law firm Cozen O'Connor. Good morning, Dave, and thanks for being here.
Thanks so much, Guy. It's my pleasure to be with you today. And as Guy said, I'm the chair-elect of the Chester County Chamber Board of Directors and a labor and employment attorney at Cozen O'Connor. First, I just want to commend the Chamber for its wonderful efforts, particularly Guy and his staff, for what they've done to help businesses through this pandemic, whether that's assisting on guidance on getting PPP loans, advocating for companies and that our Commonwealth and restrictions should be fact-based and not be unduly limiting upon our businesses and restricting, putting companies out of business, particularly the concerns right now that we have in the restaurant and hospitality field. And working with our county and local officials on those issues and to provide support for businesses that are struggling during this time. I suspect that most of the people that are on this call are company owners or human resource professionals, and we've been through a lot, haven't we, during this pandemic? We've worked through trying to understand the pandemic, putting in safety protocols for our customers, employees, to enter into the workplace, come to our place of business. We've had to deal with the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, with the paid leave provisions that are in there, and work with our employees to see how they are able to work remotely, allow them to do that, provide them the technology to do it, and be able to understand the issues that they have to deal with related to doing that, their family, personal needs, their own medical, personal health issues that they may have, and working with them to do that and making sure that work still gets done in a new world of quarantining and so forth. So now we have the prospect and COVID-19 vaccines are here and starting to roll out. So how do we as employers deal with that? How is the vaccine rollout going? What is it that we can do to get our employees back to the workplace? How should we work with the vaccine? That's what we're going to discuss today. And I think one of the first questions that comes up is, as mentioned in the first speaker, is do we mandate the vaccine or do we strongly encourage it? Particularly when this is a vaccine that has only gotten an emergency authorization. I think that poses a lot of issues and concerns, and we're going to discuss that as a panel today. And I look forward to being part of that discussion. So let me, I think we have an esteemed panel here that will be able to cover those issues and provide you some excellent guidance moving forward. So let me turn now to our next keynote speaker with my introduction of Dr. Richard Donzi. Dr. Richard Donzi is the Senior Vice President of Medical Affairs and the Medical Director of Penn Medicine's Chester County Hospital, and also heads up their occupational and employee health. With that, he is really on the front lines of everything related to the COVID-19 vaccine, from how the rollout and distribution of the vaccine is going, providing the vaccine to employees, and the medical knowledge related to the vaccines. So we're really honored to have him as part of our panel today, and it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Richard Donzi.
Thank you, Dave, and good morning, everybody. I do have a couple different roles at the Chester County Hospital, which is part of the Penn Medicine system, as we know. In my hospital administrative role, I oversee the medical staff credentialing for our hospital. And early on in the pandemic, in March and April, our biggest concern, based on the projections coming out of Johns Hopkins and out of University of Washington, is that we were going to see really huge surges in COVID volume and overutilization beyond our capacity of intensive care unit beds. So part of my job was to try to take advantage of some of the waivers that the state and Medicare issued for the credentialing of doctors, usually very stringent rules to get doctors on our staff, but a lot of those were waived, and this was considered a disaster, and we were getting ready to grant, and actually did grant, disaster privileges to a number of different doctors in the community that either had retired from their practices or were at other institutions and might be able to help us. Fortunately, we didn't need to activate that because things did start to come down. My other role as medical director of our occupational and employee health program, as Dave said, I'm touching the vaccine issues from a number of different perspectives. We have a number of different clients in the area, over 1,500, but our primary one, at least I like to think they are, is our own hospital. And since our own hospital is one of our clients, we've been involved with providing staff to give the vaccine to our hospital family, and actually beyond our hospital family, even before the state said to reserve 10% of your vaccine allotment for non-affiliated 1A personnel. That was before 1A included everybody over 65 and under 65 with health issues. We were already giving it to medical offices, medical office staffs in the community that weren't on our medical staff and weren't part of any health system that they might have been able to get the vaccine from. So we were already doing that. We've given out thousands of doses. We've been affected by the supply issues like everybody else, but we're hoping to get more quickly. We've all seen in the news how Pennsylvania has ranked among the other states in distributing the vaccine they've received. So we're part of that on the effector arm of that, and giving out as much as we can as long as we have the supply. Because we're an occupational health program, we're also managing people with questions about whether the vaccine is safe. We've been meeting with different groups that have questions about safety. We also have been managing individuals that have had side effects from the first vaccine. And if there's an allergic reaction, there's questions, can I safely get the second dose We've been helping to guide them through that. There are very clear, fairly clear at least, CDC guidelines on when you need to avoid a second dose, maybe see an allergist before you get the second dose. And then there's the non-allergic side effects as well. One of the things that's come up, because we're a workers' comp clinic, is whether or not side effects from the vaccine are considered work-related occupational injuries. And our hospital has chosen to accept them as such that our OSHA log has ballooned over the last couple of weeks as more people with vaccines get very temporary, but still side effects that cause them to miss a day of work. And as you all know, once you have a lost time injury, it's something that has to go on your OSHA log. So we're touching this from a number of different directions: vaccine safety, vaccine effectiveness, educating people that are hesitant about getting the vaccine, managing side effects, and then the actual rollout, providing staff for our own hospital, and also getting questions from area employers about whether we can help them get vaccine if they're able to get their own supply. And there's a couple of companies that actually do have the capability to have the ultra cold storage for the Pfizer, the cold storage for the Moderna, before we get the J&J, which can go in the fridge next to your yogurt for lunch. Just kidding, you shouldn't be storing medicines in those same fridges. Anyway, I'll stop now and look forward to the discussion. It is a great panel. And I'll turn it over now to our moderator, Randy Schauer from Fox Rothschild. Thanks. Take it away, Randy. You're muted.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you, Dr. Donzi. Good start, good information. Hopefully we'll be providing you with more. I am going to transition this off to some other folks. Please put your questions in the chat. And I'm introducing our panelists. We've heard from David. We've heard from Dr. Donzi already. I would like to also highlight one of our panelists, Kristen Bartholomew, Head of Human Resources at CTDI, a company I kind of put in the same category as Bentley Systems. Here in Chester County, we know they're big, but it's like the tip of the iceberg. Offices throughout the country, throughout the world. I've heard presentations at chamber events from both the Bentley folks and the CTDI folks, and they are international and strikingly similar number of offices and with the issues that are faced. So we're glad to have Kristen's perspective with us today. And if I could mention, she is a graduate of a chamber program, or at least a program where the chamber is a member, and that would be Leadership Chester County. So welcome, Kristen. Next, I'd like to introduce Dina Perrault. Dina is the head of HR for the Faulkner Auto Group, more locally based, but facilities. Somehow car repair, even though we couldn't go anywhere, was an essential service in March, April, and May last year when many others were closed down. So, hey, we got repair going on, sales, that's a little more, questionable, has been facing these issues. So more importantly, for the next section of this program, Dina is the chair of the Chester County Human Resource Association. I've been a member of that organization off and on since the 80s, mostly on, currently serve on the chair with Dina. And we welcome and we appreciate the Chamber's invitation to co-panel with this. And beyond that, I'm going to ask Dina to say a few words about CCHRA.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dina Perrault. I'm the president of the Chester County Human Resources Association. CCHRA is an affiliate of the National Society for Human Resource Management. It's the local starting point for networking, information, professional development, and continued support in all aspects of human resources. We have over 150 members, primarily HR professionals, who live and work in Chester County. We meet the fourth Friday of each month to learn about changes in employment law, review workplace trends, and to share best practices with each other. We also host networking meetings throughout the year. If you'd like to learn more about us, here's my shameless plug. Please go to our website at CHESCO, that's CHESCOHRA.org. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Dina. And just briefly, to encourage the relationship between the Chamber and CCHRA. The first 4 people who sign up for the next CCHRA program, we have meetings, now they're virtual programs, will have their guest fees paid outside of, they won't have to pay them. So you or someone in your organization who's interested, Andrea Maurer, this is not available to members of CCHRA, I'm sorry, but to folks who are not members. So please get in touch with the folks at the Chamber and let them know if you're interested, and they will be able to attend without a fee. All right, so we are going to start with a question to the panelists. After this, we will be taking questions through the chat, etc. And I see we are already having some of those. So I'd like to ask the panelists, with the vaccine distribution underway, and we look more and more to people returning to work, what's one piece of advice you would give to employers or managers? And notice it says one piece of advice. So, what's really something that, you want to keep your eye on that ball. So why don't we haven't heard from Kristen yet. So Kristen, how about we start with you?
Thanks, Randy. So my one piece of advice that I would definitely give employers and managers as we are returning to work is to certainly be very flexible, but also be very clear and consistent with your communication to your people. CTDI has been an organization that we have had our doors open since day one. And I think that really has attributed to very clear, concise communication to our people and, having very clear established COVID operational policies to keep our buildings open and our people safe.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Donzi, what perhaps your thought on this?
One of the first thoughts that comes to mind, because we're getting ready to do a panel presentation to an employer that's got a fairly heterogeneous workforce, and they've got executives down to custodians and maintenance. And they surveyed their workforce about who would be willing to take the vaccine, and predictably they got high return on the people in the more white collar jobs, and the ones that were working in the lower paying and the custodial maintenance jobs indicated a reluctance to get the vaccine. So my one piece of advice would be to start having education sessions. Our goal here, if we're ever going to get to herd immunity, we got to get as many shots and as many arms as we can. Start talking to your people who may be reluctant or hesitant. Provide them with education any way you can to get them, if you can, persuaded to take the vaccine if it's safe for them to do so.
Okay, thank you. David, from your perspective, what would be a piece of advice to give to employers or managers?
Thanks, Randy. I would really, to the extent you can, I'd say slow your roll to the extent that you can, because there is I know there's a strong desire to get everybody back in the workforce, but you really need to consider and evaluate what are the right things to do in this situation. First of all, we all have heard the issues related to the vaccine getting out there. So certainly your employee's ability to get vaccinated is one issue to take into consideration. And then evaluate whether, do you really need to mandate the vaccine, or should you be strongly encouraging the vaccine? Most clients that I have dealt with are strongly encouraging the vaccine, even healthcare providers. And some of the concerns related to that is that this vaccine only has an emergency authorization. So it's not the same level as an authorized vaccine. And that can create issues if we don't know all of the long-term side effects that could be. And as Dr. Donzi said, there can be immediate side effects that you can have. And those could be, then if it's a mandate, considered a covered under workers' comp issue. Additionally, you would have the requirement, if you're mandating it, to have to accommodate employees if they have a disability that prevents them from getting a vaccine or a potential allergic reaction. And also a sincerely held religious belief can be something that you need to reasonably accommodate. And from my own experience, that can be a very tricky issue. Like, even if someone just says, well, I've prayed about it and and I believe in my religious belief that I cannot take this vaccine, it's a tough standard, and so it's almost one that you have to sort of accept if it's claimed to be religiously based, accept that it's religiously based. So you have to work through those things. And lastly, I would say if you go the route of strongly encouraging it, think about whether there's incentives that you want to provide in order to assist employees getting the vaccine. As Dr. Donzi said, I think providing education is an excellent recommendation. Additionally, you may have employees who have transportation issues. So for instance, I know a hospital system that is providing reimbursement for Uber or Lyft rides in order to go to the facility to get the vaccine. So those are some things to consider, or there are other incentives that you want to provide to get to ensure your employees are getting the vaccine and have the herd mentality and get to a safe workplace.
Thank you, David. I am the moderator, but everything you said, particularly with regard to not many employers out there mandating, I don't think I know any yet who are doing that. That may change. Seems to be the situation. And yes, religious, commonly held, or religious beliefs do not have to be through some major religion or denomination. It could be simply, a belief commonly held by more than 3 people. So you're not going to get anywhere by questioning that aspect of whether somebody is able to assert an exemption from having to apply for the vaccine. All right, Dina, your thoughts on the question of a advice you would give to employers or managers relative to people coming back to work or returning to work.
Right. I would first echo Kristen's comment that clear and consistent communications is probably the most important thing you can do for your workforce. But I would add to that, read and learn as much as you can about the phases and planned distribution of the vaccines in your area. A lot of our employees are asking, am I up next? I'm a salesperson. They're asking all of these questions. So the more we know and understand, the better information we can give them. I would also say have a good idea which employees are eligible in each phase so you can begin communicating with them about the information that you know. As David mentioned, for Faulkner, we have just shy of 1,600 employees. And we're planning to encourage our employees to take the vaccine. We will not mandate it. But our incentive, what we're considering now, is offering a sick day, a paid sick day, the day after the vaccine, as most people feel a little off the day after. So that would be sort of the way to encourage them to do that. I would say finally listen to your employees. What specifically are they concerned about? I'll tell you, of our 1,600 employees, their fears kind of run the gamut. So I think kind of being open to having the conversations, we're almost a year into this pandemic and people are still concerned and are still worried about it, that you listen to them. Final piece, I know I said one thing, but the final piece is determine if you want to register your workplace for vaccine distribution or not, or where it's going to be available. For our organization, we work in about 8 different counties in Pennsylvania, and each county is handling it differently. So I think the more you know about how Chester County is handling it, or if it's going to be a WorkNet or a LabCorp, or where it's going to be available, then you can point your employees in the right direction.
Thank you. Thank you. And as David could tell you, we're getting some new guidances that are under consideration for wellness programs and, incentivizing people and what where you can, where you can't. It's de minimis. It's not, $5 gift card, a day off, that kind of thing. So, you all need to stay tuned for that. All right. I have some questions specific to some of the panelists. I'm going to start again with Kristen. How do you communicate your safety protocols at CTI to customers and vendors, looking a little more outward rather than inward here? And have there been any lessons learned?
Sure. So we partner with some of the largest telecommunication companies around the world. And, again, I'm going back to that transparent, consistent communication. And, what we learned is that full transparency and really learning best practices from one another has helped us get through this pandemic together. Early on, we supported one another for resources that are related to PPE. Now we're partnering with one another as it relates to, what does a vaccine plan look like? How are you handling it for your people? who are you nominating in regards to being a champion in each of your sites. So we're really partnering together in regards to how we're handling the pandemic, how we're communicating with our employees, and how we're communicating with each other.
Thank you. Dr. Donzi, I'm going to ask you a question next, but I have one arising out of your presentation, which might be of interest to a lot of employers. When somebody does come into the hospital and, seeking treatment, and you ask them about, where they got it, as you said, if it's the workplace, you fill out, an OSHA report. Do you accept their word? And I'm not saying this skeptically, I'm just asking so people know, do you accept the word of the employee that it was, something that they received in the workplace, they believe the COVID, or, what if anything's done to explore that question? Because I know every time you go into the hospital, that's always the first question. So you know what insurance is going to cover it. Just curious. And then I'll ask you the question, another question.
Well, when I mentioned things being covered under workers' comp and being considered occupational illnesses, I was referring to the vaccine side effects. But with respect to people that actually have COVID and claim they got it at work, what we do, if it's one of our employees, we have a very well-run system for tracing the contacts of positive cases in our own hospital. We have a very good handle on the PPE we use, and it's been rare to almost never that we can trace a case from patient to staff. Almost invariably, the staff, our employees that have COVID, have gotten it outside of the hospital. Early on, before there was the universal masking, we had a couple of exposures and people did get COVID as a result of that. But since then, and this is going back really very early in the pandemic in March, once everybody was wearing masks and we had a very good handle on different procedures, so-called aerosol generating procedures that might be more likely to spread it, we locked that down. So our employees that get COVID are getting it from the outside. Now, if patients come in the hospital and we test them and they're positive, we don't necessarily have the bandwidth to get into that public health role of trying to trace where they got it on the outside. We just know they're positive here, and we've got to deal with that in terms of where we house them in separate COVID units and making sure that our employees are aware when they are providing care to them that they use the appropriate protective equipment. Not sure if I answered your question, but
you did. And good information otherwise, but that was my question. So let me ask you, when you discuss bringing employees or customers back to work with business leaders, your role as occupational employee health director, what's the most common concern you hear from business leaders? Perhaps not those who are in the HR rules, have a particular perspective as those of the panelists here, but from business leaders, what kind of concerns do you hear?
Most common concern that I hear is, how do I keep a positive person out of my workforce? Who's positive and doesn't know it, the so-called asymptomatic spreader, or a pre-symptomatic spreader, somebody that might have been exposed and isn't sick yet, and yet they're able to transmit it because they've been exposed and are about to become ill or become an asymptomatic spreader. And the holy grail, it seems, for employers is to be able to have a test, a point of care test. So somebody walks up to the gate, they get swabbed. 10 minutes later, you say yes or no, you can go into work or you should go home. The only tests that are available that are able to do that is something called an antigen test. And antigen tests have been talked about in the press quite a bit. The downside is that they don't work as well in people without symptoms, and that's why you're using them. You're trying to screen people without symptoms from coming into the workforce. Their sensitivity is not that good. Out of 100 people that could have COVID that are asymptomatic, you might miss 20 of them with a point of care test. So that's the real challenge for employers, making sure somebody doesn't come in. Other employers are using symptom screens. We have something here at the hospital, or It's an automated text that we get every day. We fill out a questionnaire, and some people have, and then we get a red pass or a green pass. If we get a red pass because you said yes to fever or exposure, then you're directed to go for testing. Other employers have questionnaires, or there's somebody at the door that greets them, that asks them the questions. A lot of it's honor system. It's possible to game that. So the real concern is, how do I keep positive people out? And there are ways to do it, but they're not perfect. There's holes in them.
You just don't make everybody under 30 work from home. I'm kidding. Yeah. Well, I look at the statistics, Chester County. Anyway, David, question for you. How are you counseling employers trying to get employees to return to the office? And if you don't mind, I'd like to add a bit of a twist here. You know, sort of the issue of, you know, some people may not want to come back. You may want them to come back. You know, how you may feel that it's important for people to interact in the office. You know, so, you know, some thoughts around, you know, counseling employers to get them to return. You know, I expect short of some of the more draconian measures like threatening to fire them.
Sure. So first of all, I think communication is the key. So first of all, let's, believe it or not, people may not realize this, but there's still a governor's order in place from November the 27th that says that everyone should work remotely unless it's impossible to do so. Now, that hasn't, we haven't seen, like, that's the law and apparently can be enforced. You know, I haven't seen state police raiding places and saying, you know, why are you here? But that's certainly something that you should be aware of. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that additionally. But I think that you should try to work with your employees to, one, identify what precautions that you are taking in the workplace to provide for safety, their safety, and interacting. And I know that the question was also raised about members of the public, if they interact with members of the public. So what are the requirements with respect to members of the public that they may have to interact with when they come into the workplace, social distancing, and what precautions are taking place? I think you need to provide as much of that information and then work with them. And also understand we have employees who are dealing with children who are home taking school remotely and have to be out and are trying to manage those situations. You want to try and work with them as you can. But someone who just has a fear and does not have a disability or religiously held belief, one of those issues, and including age can be a factor that you want to work with, but you're not required to reasonably accommodate someone just because they're vulnerable because of their age. You want to try and work with them and try to have them come to the workplace. If they don't, then you have to make the decision of whether you need to mandate they come to the workplace because of morale and getting the job done and what's necessary to do that, or if you're able to work with them and accommodate them. And I would suggest that if you can accommodate them and make that happen, that you should, because it's our belief that we are going to see, after this pandemic, a large unionization effort among workforces. There have been many issues raised with this pandemic, from, am I getting hazard pay? Is my employer adequately protecting me? What is my issues with job security? Is my employer cognizant of what my personal issues are with respect to my family care, who I live with, those, and being a good employer who's trying to work with me and address those things. The unions are going to harp on that when they're able to better interact with employees when we come out of this pandemic. And we're going to be in a union-friendly environment under the Biden administration. We expect to see changes in rules and the ability for elections to take place. And so employers need to be thinking about the long-term implications as well as we move forward and try to. But you have to make the office work. You have to get the job done. So be as accommodating as you can. but just a fear is not something that is that employee is able to not come to work. You want to work with them, educate them, and try to accommodate them as best you can. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you. I did make one, one footnote to that very briefly. Just be aware, the Biden administration has tasked OSHA with developing potentially, specific guidelines for COVID-19 protections in the workplace, similar to guarding for machinery, bloodborne pathogens, the construction industry. So stay tuned to that. Dina, question for you. First, I'm going to give you one of the panelists question from the audience. I'm sorry. You mentioned you give folks a day off. Are there any other things that you were considered or that you believe might be useful in incentivizing people to voluntarily get the vaccine?
Full disclosure, we're not quite sure. One of our concerns is how much of an incentive if you give too much of an incentive, does it now become a workplace event, or would it qualify for workers' comp? So we're trying to do is something more sort of de minimis, to say that, if someone does have a side effect or needs to miss more work time, we're trying, same as Dr. Donzi had mentioned, we have a couple of those OSHA logs going, and we would like to not blow that up because people had the vaccines. So we're trying to figure out a way to kind of sort of gently push and say, we're encouraging you to get this vaccine, without it being sort of a financial windfall or anything like that. So I think sort of the minimum of saying, you might have some side effects. We understand you might need a day off, and we're encouraging you to get the vaccine, and don't worry, you're not going to miss a day of pay because of it. So I think that's kind of where we're going to end up landing.
Yeah, the tightrope with unknown consequences either side. Well, what is the most common question you believe HR officials are dealing with?
I'll tell you, it's a hard question to answer because there's no common theme. Early on in the pandemic, what we got a lot of was, do I really have to quarantine for this long? I feel fine. I feel great. I'm not in a high risk group. It's just a minor headache or whatever. So early on, the questions were really about the quarantine timing, job security, unemployment, and what we were going to do in the near and long term to provide a safe work environment. Now I'm being asked different questions, and a lot of it, I believe, is being fueled by social media and sort of fear and panic. But, should I download the COVID tracker app? And if a customer walks in and it triggers it, are we shutting down the building, kind of a thing? My answer is no. And then what a lot of people are asking now is, are we going to offer the vaccine in-house? Because we offer a free flu vaccine every year in every one of our dealerships and body shops to our employees and their family members. And I'll tell you, we're struggling with that because we're not quite sure. So we are working with local labs to try to figure out if there's a way that we could set aside a certain number of doses over a 2-week period or do something different. So we're not sure, again, because the information is kind of slow to roll out. We don't have a good answer for that, but generally the questions we're getting now are we still doing this quarantine thing? And, will the company be offering vaccines?
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, it is interesting, the evolution of the questions from now almost a year ago, March and April to now, and the basis for those questions. As I was shared when we were preparing, my daughter did get the vaccine. She said, I did not grow a third arm, and yes, my 5G reception is much better than it used to be, but I'm not sure that's actually completely accurate. So we're going to leave that topic. Some of the questions that we have from the audience, and I think, Kristen, let's get back to you. We have a question. How are you communicating internal cleaning and disinfection policies to your employees? And what, if any, additional steps are you taking to ensure your office, and in your case, offices of varying natures? I mean, you have factories, you have production facilities, you have offices. What steps are you taking to ensure they are being regularly disinfected? Just some examples.
Sure. So yeah, we have approximately 50 offices throughout North America. And, early on in the pandemic, we were essentially, when we got a confirmation of a positive, we were shutting down the facility. We were, doing a complete disinfection of the facility. And, as the CDC evolved and as we evolved, and we've been following the guidance from the CDC very strictly. And, now we're at a point, again, it's state specific. California is certainly much more strict than, a Pennsylvania. But we are essentially shutting down specific areas and cleaning specific areas when we have a positive case. We're also, transparency is key. It is our policy that, our managers, our leaders of the company, when we do have a positive case, we are informing our people every time we have a positive. Certainly protecting the private health information of the employee, but when they were last in the building, who the close not who the close contacts are in public, but we're contacting the close contacts. When the building was last cleaned, what was cleaned? If the building was not, or the area was not cleaned since the positive was in there, we're shutting down that specific area and cleaning it and informing our people. One thing we're doing in our corporate office is essentially we have our cleaning crew who comes in multiple times a week. They're putting cards on each of the desks of our, whether it's in cubicles, whether it's in offices, whether it's in, cafeteria spaces that, we're certifying this area has been cleaned and disinfected, and then the cleaner's name. So I think that has also helped given our people a sense of security. And finally, one additional measure we've taken is we have set up cleaning stations throughout our offices. So both in our corporate office as well as in our shops. And they're essentially small tables. We're providing gloves, we're providing cleaner, we're providing paper towels and disinfected wipes that, if an employee would feel more comfortable, wiping down their station before and after, which we're encouraging, in addition to the routine cleaning that we're doing, all of those supplies are available for our people.
Wow. Okay. Not to put you on, Dr. Donzi, any thought, anything to add to that, or does that sound like a pretty complete list of what you're seeing in the workplace?
Yeah, we are, and we've been in touch with Kristen and CTDI as well. And as Kristen said early on, it was like one case shut down and then things became much more liberal. But yeah, the communication, the attention to transparency with respect to cases and what you're doing is very important. And all of our companies are certainly following the lead of companies like CTDI.
Okay. A question, David. One of the questions we have from a attendee says that we, the company that I guess this individual comes from, are not mandating it, but is there any legal issue with simply making employees aware of the county's vaccine guidelines and website to register that? In other words, I guess, leaving it in the lunchroom or, making them otherwise aware. And, are there any other issues around kind of the nature of the communication beyond what we may have already touched upon? Dave?
Yeah, Randy, I don't see any issues with that. I think, you're strongly encouraging employees, you're providing them information of its availability, how they can register, to the extent you provide incentives to employees. All of that is fine and doesn't run into any legal issues. You just want to make sure the information you're providing is accurate. And so providing an incentive out there, and if someone has already gotten the vaccination voluntarily and now someone, but before you had the incentive or whatever, I don't see any issues related to that now you have to give the incentive to the person who went and voluntarily got it before this incentive was in place. Might be a good idea just from employee relations, but from a legal issue, I don't see that as being a concern. And just one other thought that I wanted to point out when you asked Dr. Donzi earlier, Randy, about whether someone gets COVID-19, whether that's and has been at work, whether that's a workers' comp issue, just be aware that in some other states, if you are working and you come down with COVID-19, there is a presumption that occurred in the workplace. And so would be covered under workers' comp. That is not the case in Pennsylvania. There was no law passed in Pennsylvania, but you want to be cognizant of your state laws in evaluating that issue.
Okay.
My understanding is that Pennsylvania did amend their workers' comp statute to say that employers could accept those as occupational, but they could also fight that. They could certainly argue that it wasn't and put the burden of proof on the employee.
It's kind of like you can do paid sick leave, or you don't have to do it anymore, at least until March, under the extension of FFCRA in the statutes. Yeah. Just a little footnote to that. Yeah, I mean, make sure that you're complying. I believe back in April, May last year, Department of Health, I think, mandated that, in workplaces, you're supposed to put a posting about, like, especially where customers can access, what you're doing. And if there are questions or issues about whether it's being done, identify the person in charge. Under CERCLA, I usually say, the designated defendant when things go wrong. But no, put the, there are notifications that are mandated too, that you make sure that you're communicating that also to your employees. Okay, here's an interesting question. I'm not sure who to ask this, maybe in David's area, but this is something I think that does, often comes up, and it has come up in other contexts in the employment world, sometimes around, mandating drug testing before anybody enters a workplace. So this says some of our employees may be needed to go on site to clients who may require that all on premises are vaccinated. If a client mandates this, but we don't require it, and it sounds like most don't, can we incentivize those who must be vaccinated and not offer the same to those who are vaccinated voluntarily? So, in other words, how would you handle that, I guess, is the larger question. Would you, take a poll of who's been vaccinated and send those people to the client? Would you require the people that would otherwise have been assigned to that client to go? Thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I think that's, listen, the client is able to mandate that. So then you have to work with that restriction. And so then you would either say, listen, it's a requirement of our client, we can only send employees who are vaccinated. So either choose those employees, or if you have a team, that's a separate team, and you want to incentivize that team to be vaccinated so that they'll be able to go to that client. I don't see any issues with doing that, and would encourage it. I don't see any problem with that at all. It's a legitimate business reason that you're doing that. You're not discriminating against how you're providing the benefit. You're providing the benefit because these are people that interact with a client that is mandating the vaccine. I don't see any issues with that.
Question here, and I'm going to direct this to either Kristen or Dina. I guess, would you do this is my first question. I think I know the answer, but can you ask if employees have received a vaccination? I'm going to put this more on the, kind of best practices level, not necessarily a legal level. Would that be something you do, or is that something you're considering doing?
So, Randy, this is actually one question that, I've just submitted to our legal team. We work with some external counsel, and, we've evolved as a company of how we're collecting information. In the early days, we were using Excel spreadsheets, and we have over 9,000 full-time employees in the US, and putting all that information on a spreadsheet in terms of who's positive or who's a close contact was, a mighty task. And, we've got some extremely talented people here at CTDI that really automated this process for us, where it's actually an online form that when we have a positive, our HR representative goes in and fills out the information. We have automated temperature taking, and it's basically almost like a machine that is taking everybody's temperature. And the next step is the vaccine question. And our team, we've got a great committee that has put together kind of a COVID vaccination kind of rollout plan. And we have appointed people in each of our facilities as really the vaccine champion. And going along with these automated forms, we've created a form to collect information as it relates to who's been vaccinated, when have you been vaccinated? So this is actually one question that I've just sent out to our legal team saying, can we collect this information? And if we collect it, I mean, it would be considered protected health information. Who can have access to this? And who, can we tell people this? So I would say that this is an evolving question. Maybe Dave might have more insight on the legal side of this. It's something that we would like to do in terms of collecting that information. As it relates to criteria for remote workers to return to the office, as many of you likely know, we are an essential business. So, we are certainly following local orders, but as an essential business, we haven't shut our doors one day. And, some of our people are on a rotating schedule. Other people, based on, medical accommodations or concerns, are, out of the office full-time remotely. And then some are in the office, full-time. So it really depends on circumstance.
I want to throw this, we could throw this to Dave or myself, but
Sure.
We'll let your counsel answer it, and probably most other people have their own counsel to answer that question. There are a lot of parts to it. But Dina, you were shaking your head. Some things, yeah, I believe the question
Sure.
was even asking about the vaccine.
Sure. We very similarly just sent it to our counsel yesterday to ask that question about, can we start collecting it? And what we've gotten sort of preliminarily is, why do you want to collect it? That was kind of the first question we got back. And we weren't thinking more about the remote because, right, we sell and service vehicles. You can't do that from home. So our folks have to be at work to do that. So we don't have that remote worker concern. My question was more about, does quarantine timing change if you've been vaccinated and now you're a close contact? That would be good information to know. So that's kind of thing we're trying to figure out, is we don't know yet what we don't know. And I see Dr. Donzi shaking his head no. So that's good. Okay, so now I have that answer, but we're trying to figure out, again, with the not knowing what we don't know at this point, I was thinking the more information we had about the employees, the better, because then we could react more quickly as things change. But having said that, our attorneys have basically put us on hold a little bit and said, what specifically are you looking to do with the information, and let's get back to you. So we're not in a rush yet to gather that. We're just trying to figure out all of the different ways we could use that information. Again, protecting people's private healthcare information, but also making sure it's operationally relevant.
That must be in my spam filter. I didn't see that email, Dina. I'm kidding. Dr. Donzi, real quick, because this question actually came up to me yesterday. The idea of somebody who I guess has been vaccinated, if they are exposed to somebody who is diagnosed as having COVID, and it was during the contagious stage. What was the answer? What was that nod or response?
Yeah, the only pass you can get from the CDC to let you get out of quarantine free card from the CDC is if you've had COVID. And
okay, so
not if you've been vaccinated. If you've had COVID within the past 3 months and you're exposed or have a CDC definition of a close contact within 6 feet of somebody, caregiver in the same home, hugging, kissing, sharing utensils, whatever, but you've had COVID, you don't have to quarantine again, you don't have to test again. Not the same rule for vaccine, and it has to do with the type of protection you get from the organic illness versus the vaccine. I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but there's two different antibodies that can be produced with the natural illness, something called IgG versus IgA. When you have the natural illness, you get the IgA, which is active in your upper respiratory tract, and it can prevent actually invasion in your mucous membranes from the virus. When you get the vaccine, it's more the IgG, which protects your lungs. You're less likely to get ill or severely ill with the vaccine, but you may still be vulnerable to invasion in your nose and be able to spread it. So if you're exposed but have been vaccinated, we're still quarantining.
Really interesting. I'll tell you what, we're kind of at the end of our time for the Q&A. We're going to open this up to our moderators for some final thoughts. And I guess this discussion kind of makes me smile. I remember, I don't know, back in August, I went into my dry cleaner, and there they had this big TV screen and they had their temperature taker, and they go like, okay, stand 6 feet from that. And from there, I guess they could take your temperature. But at the top of the screen were the 6 people prior to you with their pictures and the temperature that those people had tested at. It wasn't there the next time I went in. Not, oh my, and the whole, privacy and HIPAA, that could be another hour. So good questions there. So panelists, why don't we start with Dave, give us, it says here we get a minute because we are, coming near the end of our session, but, give, comment, thought.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. I think we've done a great job of covering things today. And to the extent we haven't been able to answer your questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And to the extent we see them in the chat, we'll try to reach out to you and get you your answers. I think that as we move forward, understanding that most employers are not mandating the vaccine. And I think that's one of the reasons that the lawyers asked those questions of Chris and Dina was, okay, well, if you're not mandating it, then why do you want to know if they got the vaccine or not? If you are mandating the vaccine, then okay, that's a question that you can ask. And there's a reason that you're asking that, and move from there. But I think that most employers are not providing information to them and working with your employees to understand their issues, what's going on with them, making sure that you're going through, if you are mandating, the reasonable accommodation for both a disability that might be raised, a serious health condition, a medical or health or physical impairment that they have, and the religious issue if they raise that, and go through the reasonable accommodation process in that situation and see if you're able to accommodate it with leave or providing more protection, having them work remotely, putting in more devices that they aren't interacting with other employees or customers. All those things would be things you would have to consider if you mandate. But understanding that the vaccine is not readily available to everyone right now, start to get those policies in place, and then consider what you're going to do when people do return to the workplace, that we're still going to be living with the pandemic for a while, and have those protections in place, pre-screening that comes in. People say there's an app for that. So for us, for our place, we have an app that you fill out, you take your temperature, questions about where you've been, what you've done, who you've been with, to understand that you're allowed to come into the workplace as a pre-approval on a daily basis. Consider those things if you haven't been open and now are considering opening the workforce. Make sure you have those in place. And those are my comments for today, and I appreciate the time with everybody.
Any additional, follow-up? Let's throw to Kristen. Anything that's come through to your mind as we've been going through this session?
Sure. My last comments would really be, again, just be flexible with your people, communicate with your people. I got 2 phone calls yesterday from different managers saying, hey, I really want to mandate my people back in the office. And, they were only coming in 2 days a week, and I need them here 5 days a week. And, I want to fire them if they can't get here. And, you have to understand kind of what the culture of the company is and what the policy of the company is. And, we certainly, we love having a heartbeat in the office. As we call it at CTDI, it's great. And, that cohesive teamwork and kind of working together. But, we also understand that everybody has very specific needs or very specific concerns, whether it be a medical condition, whether it be a childcare situation, whether it be just a common fear. And I think, at this point, we're not in a position to say, well, sorry, you need to be here. And I think just being very flexible and open with communication with your people is really going to be vital.
Thank you. Dina, any additional work?
Yeah, I'll tell you, one of the comments I've been making pretty regularly the past couple of weeks specifically is, we've spent nearly a year in what I like to call regulatory whiplash, right? The rules keep changing every week or 2 weeks with paid time off or not paid time off, or the updates in how do you clean, or, you know, can you wear a gaiter? Can you wear a mask? Can you wear a shield? Everything has changed so quickly that the best advice I can give is really pay close attention to all of the changes, really closely follow the CDC guidelines and the state, you know, advisories, and then communicate regularly with your employees. You know, we're having weekly calls with our general managers and controllers and senior staff about giving our stats, our company overall stats, you know, reinforcing the need to wear masks and to distance and to keep areas clean, and sharing, you know, the best cleaners in the area and all that kind of stuff. And then kind of reminding our employees that we are making the very best decisions we can to keep everybody safe, to keep them working, and to alleviate all their fears based on the information we have in that moment. And, you know, kind of recognizing that the information will continue to change as we go forward, but that we're going to let you know as soon as we know what's going on. And then more importantly, you know, communicate the why we're making the changes. And hopefully that, again, kind of keeps people relatively calm and engaged in that work.
Okay. Dr. Donzi, thoughts?
Put on my public health hat and tell people something you don't want to hear, which is even after you're vaccinated, and eventually everybody who wants it will be able to get a vaccine. But despite that, these are going to be around for a while. We really think we're pretty sure you can still spread the virus even if you've been vaccinated and can't get sick yourself. If you're exposed, it may be in your nose and you might be able to spread it. So the masks are going to be around for a while. Don't let your guard down. Don't think that if you've been vaccinated, you're now a sort of a super immune person. You may be for yourself, but again, you might be contributing to spread and not knowing it. And there's other benefits. We've seen almost no influenza this year. And we thought this was going to be the two of the 1-2 punch. Usually in January, you look at the CDC map for influenza cases and it's all red across the country. It's all green now. Influenza is just not happening because of the things we're doing to try to prevent COVID. So that could be something that we carry forward. In future flu fear years, although who knows, we might be getting a flu shot with a COVID shot every year. That's something that's being talked about as well. But anyway, in the short term, keep your masks, hand hygiene, social distancing until the public health folks say you get the all clear. Thanks.
Thank you. That did occur to me back in March and April that with, you know, the increased sanitation just across the population in the country, perhaps we would do better on some of these other, communicable aspects. And I'm also glad they no longer tell us that we shouldn't touch our nose anymore because mine suddenly stopped itching. That was great. Final comment. I want to thank everybody. Guy's probably going to come on at this, but and also one last comment. This picture, my first time I put a background on is from a video of the flyovers in response, or thanking the first responders for what they've done, and I want to echo that, Dr. Donzi, the others, and the work you're all doing. So thank you, Guy.
Thanks, Randy. A few notes of thank you and looking ahead. So I do want to thank our sponsor, our event sponsor today, and recall our opening remarks from Dr. Nil from Anuva Health and Cerner, one of our members and partners based in Malvern here. I want to thank our panelists for being with us and sharing their expertise. Throughout this COVID-19 era, we have been, frankly, overwhelmed with the number of members who in areas of medicine, healthcare, first responders, law, HR, you name it, have been willing to step forward to offer counsel and advice to one another. It's obviously an unfortunate reason we've had to do this, but it has been awesome to watch this community reach out to one another and offer guidance. So in that spirit, I would encourage all of you participating that if you have questions, please ask them. We will help you get the answers. If you have insights or you want to share a best practice or how you solve the problem, let us know. We will continue to use all of our media platforms to share them. And lastly, looking ahead, we will continue to hold not only our COVID informational events to help open things up, keep everyone safe, but we are more and more incorporating some traditional chamber events. We have a series of events with elected officials over the next 60 days, and we're beginning to have a mix of in-person and digital events. So I would encourage you to take a look at the Chamber's homepage, cccbi.org, to see a list of events over the next 60 or 90 days, a variety of fun events, networking events, educational events, and we're beginning to restart all of our committee programs, from our emerging leaders to our women influencing business. So we thank you for everyone's participation and support today. We look forward to working with you to reopen our businesses safely and promptly. Have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you on Zoom or in person in the near future. Thanks again. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.